Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to talk about the most important subject when handling a firearm, gun safety. Can't stress this topic enough. It is paramount when you're handling a firearm. Shooting sports are a lot of fun. It allows us to bond with friends and family, even make new friends, enjoy nature, be competitive, become more focused and more disciplined. But with that freedom, with that birthright that we have to own firearms in this country, comes a big responsibility. A gun is just a tool. That's all it is. It can't do anything without somebody doing something with it. And in the right hands, it can save lives. In the wrong hands, it can end lives. And when I say wrong hands, I don't just mean a bad guy. I'm talking about people that don't know what they're doing, essentially. Somebody that does something they should not have done, or did not do something they should have done. There might be times when you hear people say on the news, especially in the media, say there was an accidental discharge. Somebody was injured from an accidental discharge. There's no such thing as an accidental discharge. It's called a negligent discharge. Every single round that comes out of a gun that you're firing, whether it's your gun or a friend's gun or somebody that lent you a gun just to try it out at the range, is your responsibility. And this responsibility is very holistic. It's very human. Right? There's three elements to it. There's an emotional element to it. You have to be emotionally sound if you're going to handle a firearm. We don't want people that are not emotionally sound to handle firearms. It does happen. People do slip through the cracks. It's unfortunate, but it's our responsibility as gun owners as a whole to minimize that and to encourage safe ownership. And one of those pieces of the ownership is emotional. The other is intellectual. So you have to understand the laws. You have to understand how to safely handle a firearm. That's what we're going to discuss in this video. And the other is physical. You have to be physically able to handle a firearm. Now, regarding the physical aspect of it, there's an element of that I want to discuss in relation to those who are, like myself, who are disabled. I have full use of my upper body. There's nothing that's stopping me from carrying and operating a firearm safely. Some of us in the disabled community, that may or may not be true. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't safely use a firearm. There are people who rig things up on their wheelchairs or whatever their mobility device is that help them in firing a gun. There are ranges where people come in who are blind and they're assisted by members of the range and they teach them how to shoot. So in that scenario, a large part of the responsibility does fall on the person who is a member of the range or the person that's assisting the person who is blind. But things can be done. It doesn't mean that you cannot handle a firearm. It just means that you have to assess whether or not it's going to work for you, because in many aspects there's all these adaptive sports programs. There's adaptive sailing, adaptive kayaking, adaptive horseback riding, but you're not alone in most of those scenarios. And you're not alone in gun ownership either in the sport of firearms. But when you're firing a gun, you essentially are alone, because every round that comes out of your gun you are responsible for, and you need to make sure that you're practicing safe gun ownership at all times. There is no room for error. So with that said, let's talk about the four main rules of gun ownership. So the first rule is one that you can probably guess what it is. Always treat every gun as if it's loaded. Never assume a gun is not loaded. Whenever I pick up a gun in my house or wherever I am, I always check to make sure it's not loaded. Even if I know the last time I put it away in the safe, it was not loaded. So what I'll do is I'll pick up the gun, finger off the trigger, open the slide if it's a pistol, inspect it, put my finger inside there, make sure there's nothing in there. So I visually and physically inspected it, and now I know we're safe. Second rule, you never put your finger on the trigger unless you're intending to fire the gun. If you noticed, when I picked up this gun, my finger was never on the trigger. It was always resting across the slide like that. Third rule, always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, even if it is loaded. Right now, as you can see, I have it down by my sides, pointing towards the floor, where I know there's nobody. Don't point a gun, even if it's not loaded, at anything that is alive, unless it's a deadly situation that you fear for your life. It's not a toy. You don't play cops and robbers with real guns. You use Nerf guns, squirt guns, sound guns, sound toys for that. It's not funny. People have gotten hurt as a result and even killed. It has happened, so you don't want that to happen. And the final rule is always make sure that you're aware of your target and what's around it. This is mainly if you're at the range and you're firing at whatever target you're firing at, paper or steel, whatever. And especially if you are in a crisis situation where you do have to use deadly force. You don't want to aim for the bad guy and hit a good guy, or somebody's pet, or something that you're not supposed to hit. Somebody, fire a round into somebody's house or whatever. Bad news if that happens. Your life will change in ways that you never even imagined, and it won't be for the better. And stuff like that has happened too, so you have to be very careful. Always be aware of your target and what's around you. So those are the 4 rules. When I got my license, I live in a state that requires you to get a license to own a gun, to buy a gun, to do anything with a gun. I didn't even buy one for the first about 6 months. I immersed myself in the gun culture. I read books, I went online, I watched videos, I talked to people, I went to gun shows, I collected all this information about safety, about guns in general, but anything that I could to get my mind into the mindset of safety, what it is to own a gun, the responsibility and everything associated with it, before I even bought my first firearm. So that's something I suggest you do. And when you do buy one, go to the range with it. Get practice. Take courses. There are plenty of courses out there, and they're always beneficial. Some states might require you to take a safety course before you can even apply for your license. The state that I live in does require that. Even if they don't, still take one, because it will help you. Also, too, make sure you know your state gun laws. The laws in states vary from state to state. Some states have specific storage laws. Some states allow you to carry in places, in one place, like say a bar or a restaurant. Other states may not. So you have to know those laws too. A lot of the laws in certain states are a little crazy. That they're not always sensible. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. But you have to know them regardless. So you want to make sure you're up on the laws within your state. So happy and safe shooting. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, I can be reached at info@gunsinchairs.com.